In this lesson we're going to explore a topic known as nested loops. Now what are nested loops? Nested loops are loops that live within other loops. So how nested loops actually work is every time we're counting, say the first loop, the outer loop is counting from 1 to 10. Each time it goes up 1, the inner loop does a complete set of iterations. So if the inner loop is counting from 1 to 5, then with each iteration the outer loop counts 1, the inner loop counts 5. So that's a bit difficult to understand until we actually see it in action. So now what we're going to do is we're going to create a for loop. We're going to call this the variable in here outer counter, and we'll start it at 0. We'll count from 0 to 10. You need to watch the spellings. There's a spelling error there. Outer counter plus. Alright, so this is quite simply an ordinary for loop. Alright, now just to test this loop out, I'm going to output something. System.out.println. Let's output a row of asterisks, just like that. Alright, save this, and it saves as nested loops.java. Perfect. Now let's compile it and run it. Alright, it's compiled properly. Now it's time to run it, and this is what we get. Alright, we get this row of stars being outputted 11 times because we are counting from 0 to 10, and that includes 0 and as well as 10. Now to put the inner part of this loop, so I'm going to put in another for statement in here. So we count inner counter is equal to 0, and this one will allow it to count from 0 to 5, and we'll increment it by 1 each time. Alright, so this is going to be quite interesting. When we look at the results of this, it's going to be very, very interesting. Okay, let's compile this. And run it. Can you see this now? It actually outputted this line of stars more than 50 times. So it'll be 0 to 5, that's 6 iterations there, and 11 iterations. 6 times 11 is 66, so it will give me 66 rows of stars. Now this is not the actual purpose of loops, just to output stars and output text. Now what we're going to do is I'm going to output the values of outer counter and inner counter with each iteration of the loop. That's outer counter, right? And I'm going to add a space in between outer counter and inner counter, just as we did before, concatenating these numbers with strings. Alright, so we've got outer counter space inner counter. Let's see how this looks. Alright, let's run this code. Now you can see more clearly what's happening here. Outer counter starts off at 0. It remains at 0 for the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 iterations, and then we've got the inner counter that's counting 0 to 5, 0 to 5, 0 to 5. Now each time outer counter takes 1 value, inner counter takes 5 values. So each time, each single change of outer counter is equivalent to 5 changes of inner counter. Now where does something like this come in handy? This type of loop actually comes in handy where we are trying to iterate through a two-dimensional array or through a database table where we know the exact number of rows and columns. So with each row that you iterating through, you go and visit each column, come back, start at the beginning of the next row and iterate through each column. This is where a nested loop comes in.